Imagine stepping outside your home on a quiet morning, only to find the HOA president standing in your driveway, screaming into her phone and pointing at your house like she's reporting a crime scene. Her SUV is blocking you in again, but this time, she's not scolding you. She's calling 911 on you. And she doesn't know yet today is the day everything changes. I used to think Cedar Ridge was the kind of neighborhood you only saw in brochure-trimmed lawns, calm evenings, neighbors who waved while walking their dogs. And for 8 years, it rarely was. My driveway, my fence, my quiet little home. All mine, all peaceful. Until the day she arrived. Caroline Briggs didn't just move into the neighborhood, she descended on it. Bright pink blazer, clipboard always in hand, that look of constant disappointment carved into her face. Within weeks, she made herself the HOA president. And it felt like she'd been waiting her entire life for a stage this small. At first her demands were petty, nitpicking trash bin timing, warning neighbors about porch lights being too warm in color, measuring someone's garden decor like it was a museum installation. People laughed it off until she began crossing lines. My line? Specifically, the first time she parked in my driveway, I honestly believed she'd made a mistake. I walked out, smiling, tapped on her window, and gently reminded her of where she was. She didn't even pretend to apologize. She just waved me off and said, "I'll be a minute." A minute became 45. A mistake became a habit. A habit became a power play. Within 2 months, finding her SUV sprawled across my driveway became normal. Sometimes I had to park on the street because she'd taken up half the concrete. Sometimes I couldn't leave for work, and every time she'd give the same dismissive gesture, as if my property existed purely for her convenience. I tried being reasonable. Emails, conversations, printed HOA rules. Nothing fazed her. If anything, it emboldened her. Then she taped an orange violation notice to my door, claiming my trash bin had been left out too long. Every single bin on the street had been out the same amount of time. And ironically, her blocking my driveway that morning is what prevented me from bringing my bin in on schedule. That was when I realized this wasn't disorganization. This was targeted. She wanted control. She wanted obedience. And she believed her title gave her authority over everyone around her. If you've ever dealt with a power-drunk HOA, you already know how they twist the smallest rule into a weapon. And before we go further, if you enjoy real stories of people standing up to that kind of nonsense, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss how this one ends. I started documenting everything. Photos, timestamps, emails, even short videos when she claimed she'd only be a moment before disappearing for nearly an hour. Then, when I filed an official complaint with the board, I learned the worst part. The board was basically her echo chamber. They dismissed the evidence and suggested I needed to be more neighborly. That pushed me past the line I'd been avoiding. I didn't want revenge. I wanted protection, something Caroline couldn't bully with her title, something that commanded presence without a word. That's when I found Diesel, a massive Rottweiler at the local rescue shelter. Broad chest, deep eyes, calm posture. Not aggressive, not skittish, just quietly aware. The moment he leaned his weight against my leg, I knew he understood boundaries far better than Caroline ever would. And so, I brought him home. He walked the edge of my driveway like he'd been assigned the role by nature itself. He didn't bark, didn't chase cars, just watched, steady and patient. For the first time in weeks, I felt something like peace return. But peace is fragile when someone like Caroline is involved. And 3 days later, Diesel and I were about to face her again, this time in a way that would change everything. Because the moment her SUV returned, Diesel stepped forward, and Caroline slammed her brakes so hard the entire neighborhood heard it. "Move your dog, Mark," she demanded. He didn't move, and that's when she called 911. Again, Diesel sensed her before I did. He lifted his head from the rug, ears pricked, muscles stiffening as he walked toward the living room window with slow, deliberate steps. When a dog like Diesel stands up without being asked, you pay attention. I joined him at the glass. Caroline's familiar silver SUV crept down the street, coasting toward my driveway like it owned the route, no hesitation, no shame. Just that same entitled glide she'd this time, though she wasn't expecting a new obstacle. Her front wheels touched the edge of my driveway just as Diesel stepped out onto the concrete, tall and silent as a monument. He didn't bark, didn't growl. He just stood where she always wanted to be. The brakes screeched. Hard. Caroline's SUV dipped forward, her sunglasses slid down the bridge of her nose as she squinted at Diesel in disbelief, like she couldn't comprehend how a dog had the audacity to stand in a place she had claimed as hers. She lowered her window halfway. "Move your dog, Mark!" she barked, voice pinched with outrage. I stepped onto the porch slowly, leaning against the railing. "He's on my property." Caroline gaped at me. "Well, he's blocking HOA access." "There's no HOA business here," I said. "Just your habit of parking where you don't belong." Her jaw snapped shut, then opened again, a silent stutter of indignation. "This is intimidation," she hissed. "I can issue a citation for this, for my dog standing in my driveway." She grabbed her phone like it was a weapon and pressed 3 digits so fast she nearly dropped it. "Dispatch." "Yes, there's a dangerous animal threatening me. I need officers immediately." I almost laughed, but I knew better. With people like her, you don't react. You document. Diesel simply sat down, a 110-pound wall of calm disapproval. Within minutes, 2 patrol cars rolled into the neighborhood, lights flashing but no sirens. Small town, measured response. The officers stepped out, hands resting near their belts but not tensed. Carolyn rushed toward them before they even reached us, pointing frantically. "That dog blocked my vehicle." He tried to lunge at me. This man set him on me intentionally. The officer held up one hand, not unkindly. "Ma'am, let us assess the situation." Diesel remained beside me, silent, still, watching. When the officers approached him, he didn't flinch. He only tilted his head, as if evaluating them instead. The taller officer nodded approvingly. "Sir, does your dog have any history of aggression?" "None," I said, handing over Diesel's adoption papers and training notes. "He's protective, but controlled." "And did he chase her?" "Growl. Bark. Attempt to bite." "No," I said, pointing to the camera mounted above my garage. "You can check the footage." The officers reviewed it on the spot. They saw exactly what had happened. Diesel stepping calmly into position. Caroline slamming on the brakes, Diesel merely sitting down. The verdict was immediate. "That's not aggression," the shorter officer said. "That's just a dog being territorial on his owner's property." Caroline's face drained of color. "What?" "No, you're ignoring the threat. HOA rules supersede driveway boundaries." The officer turned to her slowly. "Ma'am, HOA rules do not override private property rights." Her lips trembled with indignation. "He's using that animal to terrorize me." The officer sighed, the tired exhale of a man who'd heard far too many dramatic stories in his line of work. "Calling 911 under false pretenses is a misuse of emergency services," he said steadily. "Consider this warning, number 1. Caroline froze, stunned. "You're warning me." When the officer began writing a citation for misuse of 911, she nearly came apart. "You can't do this. I'm the HOA president." The officer didn't even stop writing. "Ma'am, that title has no bearing on emergency response protocol." Her fury ricocheted across the street as neighbors peeked through windows, pretending not to watch. I remained silent, arms folded, feeling, for the first time, the pressure easing from my chest. But Caroline wasn't done. Not even close. After the officers left, she turned toward me slowly, her voice low and shaking. "You think you've won?" she whispered. "This isn't over." And when she showed up again, not during the day, but creeping across my yard under the cover of darkness, I realized she had reached a level of obsession none of us were prepared for. For 48 hours after the police citation, Cedar Ridge felt different. Not quieter, just oddly observant. When Diesel and I walked our usual morning loop, Neighbors behaved like background actors pretending they weren't watching the main scene. Mrs. Green watered the same 3 plants for nearly 10 minutes. The couple 2 doors down lingered by their mailbox long after grabbing their letters. Even old Mr. Henderson, who rarely left his recliner, suddenly found the motivation to shuffle out and retrieve a newspaper that had been sitting there since yesterday. People weren't subtle, but beneath the curiosity was something else. Relief. Someone had finally pushed back against Caroline's reign of petty terror. It should have felt like a victory. It did not. Not when Diesel stiffened every time a car slowed near our house. Not when I noticed shadows pausing too long near my driveway. Not when Jim, one of the only level-headed HOA board members, rolled up in the HOA golf cart with worry on his face. "Mark," he said quietly, stepping out, "walk with me a second." We moved down the sidewalk together while Diesel trotted ahead, sniffing the air. "I owe you an apology," Jim said. "What Caroline's been doing. This isn't what the HOA is supposed to be." I gave him a look. He winced. I know. You have every right to be skeptical, but she's been pushing boundaries for months. Writing citations none of us approved, making decisions without board review. It's gotten out of hand. It's been out of hand, I corrected. Jim nodded. The board is holding an emergency meeting. Without her, we need your statement. I had a folder thick enough to count as a small book. Emails, photos, timestamps, videos, proof of everything she'd done. I did not want to be involved in HOA politics, but I also didn't want someone like Caroline in power ever again. "Fine," I said. "I'll come. And Mark." Jim hesitated, lowering his voice. "She's not handling her suspension well. Be careful." That warning didn't fully settle until later that night, the first sign of obsession. I was halfway through, sorting my evidence, when Diesel jolted upright from his spot beside my chair. He trotted to the front window, growling. A deep, quiet rumble that vibrated through the floor. I moved beside him and peeked through the blinds. A dark sedan crawled past my house, unmarked, slow, deliberate. It didn't belong to any neighbor, and it passed again and again. By the 4th rotation, it accelerated away the moment I stepped outside. I didn't like it. Diesel didn't like it, and when a completely different car did the same thing the following afternoon, my unease grew heavier. If you've faced neighbor harassment or lived through HOA drama, you already know the quiet moments are often the most dangerous. And before we push deeper into what she did next, subscribe now so you don't miss how far this spiral goes. Because the next night is when things truly turned. Titrespas. At 11:03 p.m., my motion sensor chime jolted me upright. Diesel sprinted to the window. Hackles raised. I grabbed my phone and opened the camera feed. A figure stood at the corner of my driveway, mostly hidden in shadow. Hooded, still, watching. Not a stranger, not a criminal. Caroline. She had a stack of papers under one arm and a camera in the other. She crept toward my fence line, snapping pictures of everything. My yard, my windows, my porch light, even the angle of my garden hose. Then she crouched and began measuring the concrete with a tape measure. Diesel barked, sharp and explosive. She flinched. I burst out the front door. "Caroline!" She froze, lit up by the sudden flare of the porch lights. Her face was pale and stretched with fury. "What are you doing on my property?" He demanded, devouring evidence. She snapped. "For what?" "For your violations." "There are no violations," I said, "and you're trespassing." "That suspension is temporary," she hissed. "Once I'm reinstated, I'll rewrite every rule if I have to. Trust me, I will make this stick." Diesel stepped forward instinctively, positioning himself between us. Caroline backed away fast. "You'll regret this," she said. "All of this?" Then she disappeared into the darkness, like she had rehearsed the escape. And just when I thought that midnight visit was the lowest she could go, the next morning, Jim showed up at my door with news that changed everything. and proved Caroline was unraveling faster than anyone realized. By sunrise, I'd barely slept. Diesel rested near the front door, not fully asleep, either ears twitching at every creak and whisper of wind outside. Whatever line Caroline crossed the night before, it had jolted both of us into a different level of alertness. At 7:30 a.m., someone knocked. Diesel growled not a warning, but a recognition of scent. He knew who it was. I opened the door to find Jim standing there, hat in hand, looking 10 years older than he did yesterday. "Mark, we need to talk." He stepped inside, exhaling heavily as though preparing himself for bad news he didn't want to deliver. "She showed up at the HOA office this morning," he said. I blinked. "She suspended." "I know," he replied, "but she barged in anyway. Claimed the board was conspiring against her. Accused us of colluding with you. She demanded access to archive citations and started shouting that you'd been harassing her." I laughed under my breath. "Of course she did." Jim rubbed his temples. "She even accused you of setting a dog trap." "A dog trap?" I stared at him. "What does that even mean?" Jim raised both hands. "I didn't say it made sense. She's frantic, Mark. She's losing her grip." That part, at least, wasn't surprising. But then Jim leaned forward. "And there's something worse. We didn't know until this morning, but she tried filing a retroactive violation against you last night. She logged onto the system from her personal account, time-stamped at 11:17 p.m., the exact time she was trespassing on my property." I exhaled slowly. "So what now?" "The county is involved," Jim said. "The second arrest triggered a mandatory review. They want all her documentation, decisions, and citations from the past year, including anything involving you." That explained why he was carrying a thick folder. "And Mark," he added quietly, "your footage, it's the strongest evidence they have." Diesel lifted his head as if confirming his role in all this. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired, exhausted. Actually, because nothing about this situation was normal anymore. This wasn't about rules or driveways. This was obsession. And people driven by obsession rarely quit. By late afternoon, the neighborhood had settled into a strange, breath-holding silence. I tried focusing on yard work, racking leaves, clearing debris, simple tasks to keep my mind from spiraling. But Diesel never took his eyes off the road. At 3:42 p.m., he stiffened. A white sedan completely different from the dark one before crept around the block. Slow. Intentionally slow. It circled once. Twice. A third time. On the fourth pass, Diesel let out a growl that vibrated straight into my chest. The sedan sped up when I stepped toward the sidewalk. I didn't chase it. I just watched it disappear, feeling anger simmer low in my ribs. Caroline wasn't working alone anymore. That night, everything escalated again. The second trespass. At 9:17 p.m., my phone buzzed motion alert. Diesel was already bolting toward the window. I opened the feed. Caroline stood at the mouth of my driveway, illuminated by the street lamp. Not hidden this time. Not sneaking. Her hands shook as she held her tape measure out, like she was conducting a forensic investigation. She measured the concrete, measured the walkway, measured the fence line. Then she crouched and placed her phone flat against the driveway, as if she were recording evidence. I stepped outside. "Caroline," I called sharply. She jerked upright, startled. "What are you doing?" "Documenting violations," she said, voice thin and trembling. "And, once I'm reinstated, these will stand." "You're trespassing again," I reminded her. She ignored that entirely. "You think you can turn the whole neighborhood against me?" she said, breath shaking. "But I know what you're hiding. I know what you're doing." I stared at her. "Caroline, you need help." "No," she snapped. "I need justice." Diesel stepped onto the porch behind me, an enormous silhouette in the light. Caroline flinched so hard she almost fell backward. "Call him off." "He's not coming near you," I said calmly, "but he's not going anywhere either." Her arms trembled. "You've ruined everything." She backed into the street, and straight into the headlights of a slowly approaching patrol car. The cruiser braked hard. The officer stepped out. "Ma'am, we need you to stop right there." She ignored him completely, marching toward the vehicle and pounding on the window, shouting orders like she was conducting an army. Diesel barked once, one sharp, explosive warning. The officer reached for her arm. "Ma'am, calm down." She shoved him. That was Italiano. Within seconds, she was being restrained again, screaming that I somehow orchestrated the entire thing. If you've ever seen someone unravel in real time, you know that no confrontation feels final. And before we reach the breaking point, subscribe now so you don't miss how this madness escalates next. Because the fallout hit faster than anyone expected. The next morning, Jim returned with news that shattered the last piece of stability in Cedar Ridge and proved that Caroline wasn't just fighting to keep her power. She was preparing to destroy everything on her way down. Jim returned the next morning, looking like he had aged a decade overnight. His shirt was wrinkled, his glasses crooked, and his usual calm demeanor had been replaced with something uneasy and grim. He held a thick folder in one hand. "Mark," he said, stepping inside. "Things have escalated. Again. I'm starting to think they only move in one direction," I muttered. He didn't laugh. Instead, Jim lowered himself into a chair and laid the folder on my kitchen table with a heavy thud. Diesel sat beside me, watching him closely. "The county finished their preliminary review," Jim said. "And it's bad. Not for us, for her." He opened the folder. Inside were copies of dozens of complaints, citations, and warnings, almost all of them tied to Caroline. "She issued fines the board never approved," he explained. "Overstepped authority on multiple occasions. Filed rules that weren't part of our bylaws. And the way she treated you? They flagged it as disproportionate and retaliatory. So she's done." Jim hesitated. "She should be, but she's fighting it. Hard. She claims you orchestrated everything. She claims the entire neighborhood is biased against her. She even told the county investigator that Diesel is a weapon you trained for intimidation." I exhaled sharply. "She's unraveling, Jim." "I know," he said quietly, "which is why I came early. The board is voting tonight on permanent removal. But before that vote happens, I think she's going to try something." He didn't have to specify what. People in free fall often reach for anything to break the dissent, even if it means pulling someone else down. When the neighborhood shifted, the rest of the afternoon felt tense, in a way that's hard to describe, like the whole street was holding its breath. Neighbors waved more cautiously. Kids played closer to their porches. Even the air felt heavier, charged with the anticipation of something coming. Diesel sensed it, too. He followed me from room to room, never fully settling, always watching. Around 5 p.m., I decided to take him for a walk. Movement helped clear my head. And if Caroline was planning something, I wasn't going to sit inside waiting for it. Diesel trotted beside me, solid and alert. When we rounded the corner near Lot A80, he suddenly stopped. A familiar silver SUV was parked halfway down the block. Caroline. Her driver's door cracked open, and she stepped out slowly, not with her usual self-importance, but with a frantic energy that clung to her movements. Her hair was unkempt, her clothes wrinkled, her face pale from sleeplessness. She looked unstable. "Mark Reynolds," she shouted across the street, startling nearby neighbors. Curtains shifted. Porch lights flicked on. Diesel moved in front of me instinctively. "Go home, Caroline," I called back. She shook her head violently. "You think you won? You think you can humiliate me and ruin my position in this community? You did that to yourself." I said calmly. "Your actions caught up with you." "Lies," she screamed. "You manipulated the board. You manipulated the county. You made people turn against me." "No," I replied. "People just finally saw who you really are." Her eyes dotted to Diesel. "You trained that animal to threaten me." Diesel didn't bark. He simply stood his ground, That scared her more than any growl ever could. "Caroline," I warned, "don't take another step." "But," said Ed, "one step forward, then another." Her hands trembled. Her voice cracked. "This community was mine to run." And that's when 2 police cruisers rolled up, lights flashing, officers stepping out with practiced caution. "Ma'am!" One officer called, "Stop where you are," but she ignored him. She took another step toward me. Diesel barked, one loud, commanding burst. She stumbled backward, tripped over the curb, and fell to the pavement. The officers rushed forward. "Ma'am, stay down." "No," she screamed. "Arrest him! Arrest the dog! He attacked me." Half the street heard it. Half the street also saw the truth. The officers restrained her gently but firmly as she kicked and thrashed, insisting Diesel had lunged with intent to kill. Video cameras from neighbors' phones recorded everything. I stood silently, letting the scene unfold. Caroline wasn't angry anymore. She was broken, furious, confused, and terrified that her world, the one she built from rules, fines, and control, had dissolved around her. As they placed her in the back of the cruiser, she looked at me through the window. Not with hatred this time. With disbelief. "Why?" she whispered. "Why are you doing this to me?" I didn't look away. "I'm not doing anything, Caroline." "You are." "Te dorsut." The cruiser pulled away, and the street exhaled. That night, Cedar Ridge's HOA board held the most important meeting in its history. And what happened inside that room didn't just end Caroline's reign, it changed the entire community forever. The night of the HOA meeting felt heavier than any other night since Caroline first rolled her SUV across my driveway. Cedar Ridge's clubhouse, usually a place where people debated lawn fertilizer and block party ideas, had transformed into something else entirely. A courtroom, a reckoning, a moment the whole neighborhood had quietly hoped for, but never thought would actually happen. When I walked in, the room was already packed. Residents filled every chair, lined the walls, and clustered by the doorway. People who normally pretended not to notice each other suddenly shared murmurs of solidarity. The tension wasn't fear. It was relief, waiting for permission to breathe. Jim stood at the front beside 2 other board members, shuffling papers with the posture of a man shouldering the fate of the entire community. When he spotted me, he gave a small nod, equal parts gratitude and exhaustion. "We're here," he began, "to review evidence regarding the conduct of HOA President Caroline Briggs." A wave of whispers rippled through the room. I stepped forward with my folder photos, documents, time-stamped emails, recordings, and placed it on the board's table. When Jim asked me to speak, I didn't dramatize, exaggerate, or perform. I just told the truth. I described the driveway incidents, each one worse than the last. I explained how she dismissed every boundary I set. I recounted the false citations, the fabricated 911 calls, and the trespassing. The videos didn't lie. The timestamps didn't lie. The neighborhood didn't lie. When I finished, silence filled the room. Then something unexpected happened. One by one, other residents stood and told their own stories. "She'll find me for leaving my hose out for 5 minutes. She threatened to tow my daughter's car, even though it was parked legally. She measured my garden frogs with a ruler and said it violated aesthetic harmony. She told me my wreath was emotionally confrontational." The stories kept coming, frustration layered on frustration, months or even years of quiet resentment spilling into the open. People weren't just annoyed. They were tired. Tired of being bullied. Tired of being watched. Tired of living under her obsession with control. You could feel the shift in the air, something long overdue, finally breaking loose. "Thank you," Jim said at last, lifting his hands for quiet. "We've heard enough. The board will now vote." It took 10 seconds. All 3 hands rose. "Effective immediately," Jim announced, "Caroline Briggs is permanently removed from her role in the Cedar Ridge HOA. She is barred from holding any board position, now or in the future." The room broke into applause, loud, cathartic, explosive. I didn't clap. I just breathed outwardly, fully as a weight I'd been carrying for months slid off my shoulders. After the meeting, neighbors who barely acknowledged me before offered handshakes, nods, even thanks. Mrs. Green hugged me so abruptly that Diesel actually tilted his head in confusion. And speaking of Diesel, if you're enjoying how he helped hold the line in all of this, subscribe so you don't miss future stories where he makes an appearance. Because, trust me, wheelie. The following day was the calmest Cedar Ridge had felt in ages. No SUV blocking my driveway, no frantic pacing, no tape measures in the dark. Instead, neighbors walked their dogs with actual smiles. Kids rode bikes without parents watching nervously from porches. The air felt lighter. Asif Cardeline's absence had lifted a fog. None of us realized we'd been breathing for years. Jim visited that evening. "She's not coming back," he said quietly. "Her removal is final, and the county's investigation, well, let's just say she won't be involved in HOA matters anywhere for a very long time." He nodded, not out of satisfaction, out of closure, because the truth is, this whole ordeal taught me something deeper than how to handle a rogue HOA president. It taught me the value of boundaries, physical ones like the edge of a driveway, emotional ones like refusing to be intimidated, legal ones like knowing your rights, and personal ones like understanding when enough is enough. People like Caroline don't crumble because you yell louder. They crumble when they can no longer control the narrative. Diesel nudged my leg gently, a reminder that some forms of strength don't need to growl to be effective. They just need to stand firm. "Good boy," I whispered. And if you've ever faced an HOA nightmare or any bully who thought their authority was bigger than your dignity, stick around and subscribe, because these stories don't end here. And neither does Diesel's. My driveway is mine again. My peace is back. And for the first time in a long time, Cedar Ridge finally feels like home.